Dear guests, may I request some silence, please? Dear guests, it's time to have lunch, and in order to be more in appetite, I think we have the best of a possible appetizer, which is a small inspiring speech. And for making this speech, I want to thank very much on behalf of the European Union, Senator Murphy. Senator Murphy, as you know, is the chairman of the most important subcommittee for us, the subcommittee on European affairs. And he has had previously impressive predecessors. You know that this function usually leads to be elected after that President of the United States. But I would say that he has done one thing that his glorious predecessor has not done. He has come here with us today, something that Barack Obama never did. So I just ask for you a round of applause, because Senator Murphy is one of our best friends and a tireless speaker about the need of keeping and strengthening our links, and he has successfully been made himself available today in a day where, as you know, there are so many things going on the issues we are dealing with, Ukraine, security, and so on, in Congress. So I just give you Senator Murphy, very proud of it, but before hearing him, I suggest a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Francois. Thank you to the European Union delegation, to so many of my friends here in the audience, a number of generals, military leaders, ambassadors, really stunning and a testament to the great work of this conference. This is a very busy day across the city at the United States Capitol. As you know, Secretary Nuland will be testifying before our committee, the Foreign Relations Committee, later today to give us an update on events in Ukraine. We have a meeting of the Democratic Caucus in about a half an hour, and so I'm only sorry that I won't be able to join you for more of your meeting here today, but this is as important as it gets. This moment is as big as it gets for the transatlantic relationship, and so I wanted to make sure that I was able to carve out a small portion of my day to come here and greet you, thank you for the work that you've done, and offer a few prepared remarks. You know, one of the most celebrated words in American lexicon today is this word disruptor. If you spend any time here in the United States, you know what I'm talking about. We celebrate these bold figures in science and commerce and in culture, people like Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg, that through the sheer force of their will introduce a new idea that changes the way in which we view the world. Most of the time they succeed and often profit immensely because the rest of the world doesn't notice for far too long that this disruption has taken place. That these figures, through their introduction of these new products or new tactics, have changed the rules of the game. For instance, Microsoft, one of America's most profitable, biggest companies, slipped because they didn't understand that Apple had moved the world of personal computing to a handheld scale. And by the time they realized that the game had shifted to a new platform, it was too late. I mention this phenomenon of disruption because I think it can help us understand what's happening in the Ukrainian theater today. I am frankly sick and tired of hawkish political commentators celebrating the bravado and the bold leadership of Vladimir Putin. His invasion of Crimea and eastern Ukraine was and is, in my view, a panicked reaction to the lessening of Russian influence on its former republics. His aggression is a symbol of Russian weakness, not strength. I would argue, however, that instead of bluntly celebrating Putin's brazenness, we should appreciate the significance of the tactics that he is using and realize perhaps that if we don't adjust our tactics accordingly, we will risk suffering the same fate of competitors to disruptors in the commercial space. The journalist Edward Lucas recently contrasted the Western view of warfare with the new generation warfare being practiced by Russia. In this new type of warfare, Russia uses psychological methods, intimidation, bribery, and propaganda to undermine resistance, so that firepower is rarely needed to get their way. If the other side lacks the organization, training, and leadership to resist, they won't. They can't resist. The Latvian defense analyst Jānis Berzins outlines 8 phases of this new kind of warfare, which includes a mixture of economic, political, and psychological pressure, extensive propaganda and disinformation, bribery of local officials, use of trained provocateurs — we've seen plenty of that over the past several months — cyber attacks, and the occupation of military bases and targeted government buildings. Now, the only way that this new kind of strategy works is if the other side has been weakened to the point of catastrophic vulnerability. If Ukraine had been a strong, modern, efficiently run country, these tactics would have failed early on. Government forces would have blocked airspace and road junctions, cut communications or power supplies to Russian bases, disabling and blunting the attack before it gained momentum. The local police and security agencies would have been loyal. They would have been effective, meaning that pro-Kremlin provocations met a unified and united response from law enforcement and civil society. Indeed, in this new era of warfare by gradual provocation, the only real defense may be the prophylactic of internal strength. When Russia uses these tactics, if the West is not ready to meet it with military force, with the exception of our NATO alliance, we are likely not, then the only way to truly repel this type of disruptive aggression is to make sure that vulnerable nations and areas aren't vulnerable any longer. That is our common transatlantic project. So let me give you a few not so original ideas on how we go about this work. One clear way to improve the state of transatlantic defense is to ensure that our budgets are robust enough to enable Europe to credibly defend its territory. I think we're all aware of the challenges of selling increased defense spending to skeptical publics. I ran for Congress largely in opposition to the war in Iraq, now 8 years ago, and I continue to believe that we shouldn't be so eager to send our military into conflicts that largely require political, local, and organic solutions. Yet even as our defense budgets are shrinking, President Obama has rightly pledged ground, sea, and air assets to reassure European allies, and more significant assistance is being considered. Now, I'm someone who has previously voted to rotate U.S. troops out of Europe when I was a member of the House of Representatives, but I now believe it's time for the United States and our allies to make new commitments through NATO to troop strength in Europe, particularly on the eastern edge of the coalition. Our commitment to Article 5 is ironclad, and I believe that we should be able to continue to make that crystal clear to anyone who might doubt it. As Secretary Kerry and Secretary Hagel have reminded us, Russia's invasion and annexation of Crimea shattered the illusion that the end of the Cold War ushered in an era of perpetual peace on the European continent. The challenge before us is whether we as leaders can convince a war-weary public that smart investments in defense spending within the transatlantic relationship will help prevent future wars. Second major commitment should be to speed up the movement of Europe away from its reliance on Russian fossil fuels. I know you'll talk a lot about this over the course of the day. I think that Russia has made an immense strategic mistake, a blunder of short-sightedness in its actions in Ukraine, but only if we make sure that this aggression is a road-size, billboard-size advertisement for why Europe can no longer be held hostage by Russian oil and gas. Now, I won't claim to lecture you on all of the ways that Europe can go about this through internal changes, but let me say a word about American LNG exports, which are increasingly part of this debate. I am very sympathetic to Europe's interest in expanding its imports of LNG from the United States, and I'm open to a conversation about targeted strategic exports to Europe. You're all familiar, of course, with the logistical challenges and lengthy time frame of such an endeavor, but it's still worthwhile. Now, in New England, where I'm from in the United States, the cost compression of energy due to the development of domestic natural gas resources has been a great benefit. Energy prices here are at historic lows, and there's understandable reluctance to export this valuable commodity. This reluctance is due to the potential effects on cost, but also on the pressure it would create to expand the practice of fracking, which, as Europe knows, brings with it some questions about environmental costs and contamination. Despite these concerns, I, for one, am willing to support targeted export of LNG resources to Europe, but only in the context of a coordinated transatlantic energy policy. For instance, why would America send natural gas to a country in Europe that itself was totally unwilling to explore its own deposits of tight gas? Or what about a nation that's abandoning its nuclear capabilities and simply seeking to replace that energy with American gas? Or worse, what about a country that's moving forward with nuclear power but allowing Russia to build their plants? If the United States does make the decision to export natural gas to Europe, I would suggest that we do it in coordination with new European energy policies that modernize energy economies and develop European energy assets while bringing in new resources from the United States. Finally, a word about the transformational power of TTIP, perhaps the single greatest tool for advancing the transatlantic relationship. There's an unassailable case to be made that this trade agreement and its benefits will accrue in immense proportions to the United States and to Europe. It would send a clear signal that the United States and Europe are standing together, not just in terms of security cooperation, but also in terms of trade and investment. And this is going to be a difficult agreement. It will look fundamentally distinct from other agreements that the United States has signed. It will require an unparalleled level of cohesion amongst our European allies. But this is about the United States and Europe reasserting the fact that we don't need to resort to coercion and bullying in order to demonstrate the upside of trading and investing with us. The people of Ukraine understood that difference very clearly. So the crisis in Ukraine began because people were fed up with the corrupt Russian-style oligarchic economic model. To many Ukrainian people, especially the young people, an association agreement with the EU, an association with the West, represented a path towards a brighter future. I got the chance, along with Senator McCain, to speak to about 500,000 Ukrainians that were gathered on the Maidan one beautiful, sunny but cold day in December. And afterwards, we got the chance to talk with some of the young activists who were in charge of the movement. And the one word in that meeting that they kept on repeating was a very simple word. It means something different in every culture, but the word is dignity. They wanted dignity back in their lives through better education, through more opportunity, less corrupt government, the ability to travel where they wanted in the continent. And regardless of what happens over the short term, the same values and standards that drew the Ukrainian people to Europe in the first place will continue to be a strong draw. In the long run, Putin has no tools that can extinguish the flame of those people on his borders who simply want a more dignified existence. But even though the natural flow of events will accrue to our benefit, we shouldn't wait. And now is the moment for Europe to stand strong with one clear, unified voice, not just with respect to these challenges that are presented to the transatlantic partnership, but send a clear message to Russia as well, that this kind of aggression, this kind of end around of legitimate international processes will not be tolerated. You know that the United States is prepared to stand with you. We now need a Europe that is whole and together, sending a strong message with the United States government in support of the Ukrainian people, a strong message to the Russians as well. Vladimir Putin has changed the rules of the game, and we should wake up to this reality together before it's too late. But our response is not about meeting fire with fire. Our best new tactic is an old one. Reinvest in the transatlantic relationship, strengthen its institutions, strengthen its economic ties, bolster its most vulnerable elements. And to make sure that we don't suffer the same fate as other competitors of prior disruptors, do it now, before it's too late. Have a wonderful conference. Thank you so much for your friendship to the United States, your friendship to this alliance. I look forward to working with you for years to come. Thank you very much for having me this afternoon.